The war that never happened, USA versus Russia, it began not with gunfire, but with silence. In 1945, the world stood in ruins after the Second World War. Cities were reduced to ashes, millions were gone, and yet, out of that destruction, two giants emerged. On one side stood the United States, on the other, the Soviet Union. They had fought together against a common enemy, but the moment that enemy fell, something shifted. Trust disappeared, and in its place, a quiet war began. Chapter 1. The birth of suspicion, Washington and Moscow looked at each other not as allies, but as threats. The United States believed in freedom, open markets, and democracy. The Soviet Union believed in control, equality enforced by the state, and a world reshaped under communism. Two systems, two visions, one planet, and neither was willing to step aside. So they began to prepare, not for peace, but for something much darker. Chapter 2. The Cold War begins. There was no battlefield, no official declaration. But make no mistake, this was war. They called it the Cold War. It was fought in whispers, in shadows, in intelligence briefings and secret operations. Spies became soldiers. Information became weapons. Each side watched the other constantly. A single misstep could trigger the end of the world. Chapter 3. The Arms Race. Fear becomes power. Then came the bombs. The United States had already shown the world what nuclear weapons could do. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were proof. The Soviet Union followed. Soon, both sides were building weapons not just to win wars, but to end civilization itself. Thousands of warheads, missiles that could cross continents in minutes. The logic was terrifying. If we can destroy each other completely, neither of us will dare attack. This became known as mutually assured destruction. Peace built on fear. Chapter 4. Wars without names, since years. Direct fight would mean destruction. The war moved elsewhere. Different countries, different people, but the same two powers pulling the strings. Korea, 1950, a divided nation. The North backed by the Soviet Union and China, the South backed by the United States. The war was brutal. Families torn apart, cities destroyed. And in the end, nothing changed. A line remained on the map. No winner. Only scars. Vietnam. The United States stepped in, determined to stop communism. The Soviet Union supported the other side. Years passed, lives were lost, and slowly, the tide turned. The United States withdrew. For many, it was a moment of realization. Even a superpower could lose. Afghanistan, 1979. This time, it was the Soviet Union's turn. They entered Afghanistan expecting control. Instead, they found resistance. The United States quietly supported the fighters opposing them. What followed was a long, exhausting war. Eventually, the Soviet Union pulled out, weakened, drained, and something inside it had begun to break. Chapter 5. The Breaking Point. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was struggling. The economy was failing. Resources were stretched thin. The cost of competing with the United States, militarily, technologically, economically, was simply too high. Inside the country, people began to question everything. And for the first time, the system started to crack. Chapter 6. The Fall. It didn't happen with explosions or invasions. It happened quietly. The Soviet Union collapsed. 15 separate nations emerged from what had once been a superpower. The Cold War was over. No final battle, no surrender speech. Just an ending. Chapter 7. So who won? It's a simple question, but the answer isn't. The United States didn't defeat the Soviet Union on a battlefield. There was no invasion, no conquest. But it did win. Strategically, the Soviet system couldn't keep up. Economically, politically, and socially, it failed under pressure. So in that sense, yes, the United States won the Cold War, but it wasn't a victory celebrated with parades. Because everyone understood what had almost happened. Chapter 8. A war that could have ended everything. At several moments, the world came dangerously close to destruction. One wrong decision, one misunderstanding, and nuclear missiles could have been launched. There would have been no winners, only silence. Chapter 9. The rivalry continues. After the fall, Russia didn't disappear. It changed, rebuilt, regained strength, and once again, tensions began to rise, not through direct war, but through influence, alliances, and regional conflicts. Ukraine, Syria, cyber warfare, different battlefield, same rivalry. Chapter 10. If war happened today, people still ask, what if the United States and Russia fought a real war? The truth is, they already know the answer. Both countries have nuclear weapons powerful enough to destroy the world many times over. A full-scale war wouldn't be about winning territory. It would be about survival. And even that wouldn't be guaranteed. Final conclusion. So who defeated who? The United States emerged stronger at the end of the Cold War. The Soviet Union collapsed. History records it as a victory. But the deeper truth is this. Both sides spent decades preparing for a war they could never afford to fight, because in that war, there would be no winner. Closing line. The greatest battle between the United States and Russia was never fought, because both sides knew the same thing. The moment it began, everything would end.